the global reach and consequences of Russian misinformation. So to start off, I want to address that 86% of internet users online are exposed to misinformation. And this is a growing trend with the increased spread of Russian misinformation. But how does Russian misinformation manifest itself, and what makes it especially harmful? Well, before we get into that, I think it's important to know the background of where Russian misinformation comes from. So after the collapse of the Soviet Union, there was a decrease in funding for media and news outlets all around, which led to media being privatized and controlled by politically powerful individuals. And then the then president, Boris Yeltsin, merged the news with the Russian Information and Intelligence Agency, or RIIN, which led to a very powerful and very widespread propaganda machine. And then additionally, because there wasn't much public funding for news, journalists weren't being paid very consistently, which led to an increase in briberies, which just further fueled Russia's descent into media control by the politically powerful. And then in modern times, with the rise of social media, suddenly Russian misinformation is widespread and can affect really anybody anywhere, no matter what they're doing and where they are. So when it comes to media control, Russia uses two tactics. The first of which is informational warfare, in which a country purposefully spreads misleading information to a target country in order to sway public opinion. And this is proven to have psychological impacts, which leads to an altered ability to build opinion and reason. And the second type is cyber warfare, which includes cyber espionage and cyber attacks or hacking. And this disrupts citizens' perceptions of their own country and just goes back to the primary purpose of media control to be to change people's ability to reason and their opinions. So there are two significant examples of this media control, the first of which is disinformation that leads to a swaying of public opinion. So this happened in 2014 with the downing of Malaysia's airlines flight MH17. There was evidence that Russian-backed individuals with Russian-supplied missiles downed this flight. However, Russia spread misinformation to deflect the blame and to alter the perceptions of what really happened. And then secondly, cyber espionage or hacking, which leads to destabilization in other countries and really just goes back to altering public opinion. The most popular example of this is during the 2016 presidential election, when a Russian hacker hacked into the Democratic National Convention and leaked classified emails and documents in order to put fear and mistrust in the then Democratic presidential candidate. Additionally, former Soviet states are very heavy targets for cyber attacks when it comes to Russia. In 2008, Russia was involved in a massive cyber attack in Estonia that targeted computer networks, media, and banks. And then in 2014, Russian media machines leveraged newspapers and TV stations in Ukraine in order to spread pro-Russian propaganda, which then led to increased Russian support in Ukraine that really just changed the public opinion and led to a decreased fighting potential against Russian misinformation and Russian media warfare. And that support subsequently led to the annexation of Crimea, which was the southernmost peninsula in Ukraine, and led to the now current Russian-Ukrainian conflict that's happening right now. So the question's often raised, why don't people in Russia speak out against this media control? Well, I think it's important to understand that that's not really a possibility for Russian citizens, and I think this can be seen when we compare how the protesting of Edward Snowden in the United States was handled to the protesting of Alexei Navalny in Russia. So Edward Snowden was a former contractor for the National Security Agency in the United States, and he leaked classified documents and internet surveillance, and he believed that disclosing this information was necessary in order to protect civil liberties and to make the public aware that they were being surveillanced at all times. Him speaking out caused massive protests all over the United States, which then led to corrective action being taken, which meant that that type of surveillance that the United States was doing was limited and was controlled and was made more publicly known. And then Alexei Navalny was a protester against media control and the class pay gap in Russia. His protests led to a lot of demonstrations all over Russia and all over the world, and he even ran as president against Putin as a show of protest. And when he got really popular, he was poisoned, and then when he left Russia in order to recover from that and he came back, he was subsequently jailed. And then a few months ago, he mysteriously died in prison, although it has been heavily speculated that it was at the hands of people close to Putin for the purposes of basically silencing him. And the difference of how these two men were treated in their protests really highlights how speaking out is suppressed in Russia. And it's often not really an option, and makes the problem of Russian misinformation seem a whole lot bigger and a whole lot more difficult to fight. But how can Russia's use of misinformation be effectively countered? Well, in order to do this, I think it's important to take collective action to take corrective action. Now, I think the best way to explain corrective action is with Eloise Kobel in the United States. She discovered that there's mismanagement of tribal funds, and she was able to organize a huge class action lawsuit that really brought to light the mismanagement of funds, and she was able to basically change the landscape of how tribal funds were managed so that the mistakes that she realized were happening wouldn't happen again, which really just helped people down the line have a better standard of living on reservations. But how can we bring about this change? Well, first, I think it's important that we have education on misinformation. And this can be seen through media literacy classes, so people understand that sometimes what's being posted isn't always the truth, and that just because it's posted online doesn't mean that it's not biased or not propaganda. And this can also be seen in social media flagging posts that lend itself to be politically leaning one side or another. And then secondly, we need to take collective action. We need a lot of people, a lot of politically powerful individuals, and a lot of nations publicly speaking out against the Russian misinformation phenomenon in order to halt it. Now, limitations for this is that since it's such a deep-rooted problem, a lot of action would need to be taken. And so a bunch of people all over the world would need to speak out and really make it known how they don't support Russia's use of misinformation. However, no change will be made if no action is taken, and that is why I believe we need to start making large and effective changes right now in order to limit misinformation.
Okay. All right, your first question, Hannah, thank you very much. How did some preliminary information, your early sources that you discovered, that you gathered, inform your research?
So Choplan Abduraveya, I'm pretty sure that's how you pronounce his last name, his article that was like informational warfare in the cyber domain or something like that, it had a lot of background information on where the problem started, and it also gave really good context for what was happening, because like I don't really know anything about information like internet a lot, and so his basically explanation of it really helps me be more informed about what I was writing about.
Okay. And what additional questions emerged from your research? Why are these questions important?
I think there should be more questions about what other countries are doing too, because it's not just Russia that's has problems with misinformation, but they're the most widespread and most widely recognized. But I think I would have more questions about the more subtle ways that it's controlled, and really just more ways to do to make more legislator against it, and so that it's a more widespread known issue.